At the Axamaco nuclear plant, a dire situation unfolds. One of the nuclear reactors is ablaze with radioactive flames. Drones buzz overhead, and guards scramble in every direction. Inside the facility, panic reigns as employees dart aimlessly through the corridors. Amidst this chaos, two technicians desperately attempt to avert a reactor explosion, but they can't come to an agreement on which button to press. Suddenly, seemingly out of thin air, a disheveled time traveler materializes. He tries to offer guidance to the frantic employees through a soundproof glass door, but his words fall on deaf ears. Drawing closer, the stranger advises the engineers to press the yellow button, though his own uncertainty is palpable. Shortly thereafter, two members of the Time Patrol appear, intent on arresting the enigmatic visitor. Just in the nick of time, he vanishes into thin air, leaving the patrol agents behind to advise the engineers to disregard the Wanderer's counsel and press the blue button instead. Mysteriously, the patrol agents also vanish. Amidst the confusion, the technicians eventually heed the final advice and press the blue button. Initially, it seems like the crisis has been averted, and colleagues begin to celebrate. However, their joy is short-lived as a massive nuclear explosion rocks the plant. Many years earlier, a government representative named Gilbert Alibert stands on the brink of authorizing the construction of a contentious atomic plant by a Chinese corporation. During a press conference, he justifies this decision by emphasizing the job opportunities it will create and touting nuclear energy as the cleanest available option. From the back of the room, an eco-activist named Alice confronts the bureaucrat, asserting that the company is relying on outdated technologies with potentially catastrophic future risks. Security promptly removes Alice and her like-minded companions from the premises. The construction of new nuclear power plants sparks a debate. At the police station, Alice's friends reveal that they managed to capture their arrest on video and suggest posting it online. However, Alice hesitates, believing that the focus should remain on the power plant's construction, not on them. In that moment, a police officer arrives, releasing Alice and informing her that her father has come to collect her. To the astonishment of her fellow activists, Gilbert himself enters the room and whisks her away. During the car ride, Gilbert scolds his daughter for her resemblance to her late mother, who was also an eco-activist constantly on the move. Alice, in turn, hints at her father's potential involvement in bribery, alluding to the questionable reputation of Axamaco. Afterward, she exits the car, leaving her friends to call her from the station and accuse her of lying about her father. To atone for her guilt, Alice agrees to break into her father's computer and uncover evidence of his illicit connections with Axamaco, or else they will release the video, revealing her parentage. In the evening, Gilbert watches video recordings of his deceased wife while sipping a drink. In a somber mood, he closes the laptop and retires to bed. Meanwhile, Alice covertly enters the house and stumbles upon the same time traveler who is attempting to steal her father's laptop. The young man attempts to explain something, but Alice reacts impulsively, striking him with a bottle. The commotion draws her father downstairs, and Alice awkwardly tries to explain that she came to make amends, but found this wanderer attempting to steal his laptop. Suspicion fills Gilbert, who suspects collusion and threatens to call the police. Suddenly, a brilliant light flashes in the yard. At the same instant, the time traveler regains consciousness and frantically tries to convey that the construction of the power plant must not proceed. As a fierce firefight erupts outside with the Time Patrol, Gilbert gets injured. Desperate to escape, the traveler grabs Alice and her father, transporting them into the future. Upon awakening in a strange underground network of catacombs, Alice reacts instinctively, kicking an unknown figure and making a run for the light. As she reaches the edge, a horrifying sight unfolds before her, the post-apocalyptic ruins of Paris. Overwhelmed by shock, Alice loses consciousness, but a helping hand prevents her from plummeting further into despair. Meanwhile, over at the headquarters, the Time Patrol agents Louise, Mateo, and Victor return to receive a stern reprimand for their recent failure. Constance, their leader, scolds them for missing the main criminal and the time traveler who could disrupt the space-time continuum. Consequently, Louise is appointed as the new leader of the operation. This raises a pressing question. Could altering the past be even more perilous than the impending disasters threatening humanity? Alice wakes up in a cluttered room and hears her father's voice from the adjacent room, assuring her that they are now in some sort of confinement. Suddenly, a guy named Raph enters, the same one Alice had hit when they first met. He suggests grabbing a meal and explains that it's not a prison. It's his bedroom. They've taken refuge here because going outside is unwise, and Raph also wound up here by accident, all the way from the 21st century. Raph suggests continuing their conversation in the laboratory, where a visitor awaits. Alice's father is brought there as well, and he threatens them all with punishment. The visitor points to the door, inviting them to leave. Gilbert presses a button, and a heavy metal door swings open, revealing an unexpected horde of grotesque zombies. Terrified, they slam the door shut, and the visitor quips that he forgot to mention the zombies. At this moment, the third member of their group, Dr. Henry Castafolta, enters the laboratory. He explains that besides the regular walking zombies, there are even more dangerous infected ones they call runners, all spawned by radiation. They show an old video depicting a nuclear catastrophe, validating Alice's earlier warnings. However, Gilbert stubbornly denies everything and refuses to accept that they've been transported to the future. To prove the reality of their situation, the group boldly carves a path through the zombies and suggests taking a stroll. In a rusty, armored car, they embark on a tour of the desolate streets. Suddenly, they come to a halt and urge Gilbert to behold the main attraction, a massive radioactive cloud that orbits Earth every 70 years, wiping out all living things. With each cycle, it grows larger, ensuring that this time, no one will survive. Confronted with the undeniable evidence, Gilbert finally acknowledges his error, and the visitor prepares to take drastic action. Alice, however, steps in, shielding her father and pleading for an alternative approach to save humanity. The visitor explains that their original plan was to steal the laptop and incite a political scandal, but now they must be eliminated, as the Time Brigade will still be on their trail to prevent any tampering with the course of time. It's at this moment that Gilbert loses consciousness, leaving everyone in a state of confusion. Raph proposes an alternative solution. Rather than external changes, they must alter themselves internally to evade the scrutiny of the Time Patrol. This way, a person can actively shape history. To the group's surprise, Dr. Henry Castafolta concurs with Raph's idea. Alice attempts to convince the visitor that her father can change, emphasizing that he wasn't always a cynical bureaucrat. The visitor reluctantly agrees, but warns that if the Time Patrol locates them, he will be compelled to take extreme measures. Meanwhile, the Time Brigade locates and extracts from the Wanderer the whereabouts of the visitor's laboratory. On their journey, Alice shares that only her mother, who tragically passed away during childbirth, could have transformed Gilbert. The visitor drops a hint that they won't be saving her mother, because doing so would create a paradox. Alice would exist, while simultaneously not existing. Raph suggests showing Gilbert their hideout as a means of influencing him, but the visitor firmly silences him. Later, Henry heads to the lab, leaving the rest to explore a local pub. As Alice and her father interact with the patrons, the visitor and Raph discuss the potential of Alice, even contemplating recruiting her into their group. A heated dispute erupts between father and daughter, revealing that it's due to Gilbert that the radioactive cloud will soon obliterate them all. They cleverly divert the angry crowd with promises of free drinks and make a hasty exit. Upon encountering a swarm of zombies, the visitor attempts to teleport the entire group, but the device indicates a low battery. Unexpectedly, a gang led by someone known as Least Weasel comes to their aid, diverting the zombies' attention. Meanwhile, the Time Patrol stages a raid on the laboratory. Anticipating their arrival, Henry gathers essential items, activates the self-destruct sequence, and exits the lab. A massive explosion ensues, annihilating everything in its path. In the wreckage, Louise and her team discover a map leading to the hideout. Simultaneously, our group arrives at the very hideout, a concealed settlement with remnants of civilization and children. While they take a break, Raph suggests that Alice join their gang, revealing that they even have a real robot. The visitor explains his reluctance, expressing doubts about trusting these newcomers. However, Least Weasel reassures the visitor that people deserve a chance, and not everyone needs to be eliminated. During lunch, a badly burned Henry suddenly teleports onto the table, alerting them that the Time Patrol is closing in. In a flash, the Time Patrol arrives at the hideout, and Least Weasel swiftly gives orders for everyone to take their positions. The resourceful children quickly flip tables and start pelting the intruders with stones. Amidst the chaos, a member of the patrol hurls a grenade, a danger that Dr. Henry bravely shields the group from. As the dust settles, it's revealed that Dr. Henry Castafolt was, in fact, the very robot they had encountered. Frustrated, the visitor reaches for a gun, seemingly intent on harming Gilbert, blaming him for the entire situation. However, a disapproving glance from Least Weasel halts him in his tracks. He lowers the weapon but receives an electric shock from one of the patrol members. Raph also attempts to defend himself but is met with a similar fate. Least Weasel orders the group to surrender, and Louise removes her helmet to reveal her face. She explains that they had come for only a few specific individuals. The patrol apprehends the visitor and Raph, while Gilbert and Alice are taken away. In the Time Brigade office, Constance expresses her gratitude to Alice for helping them capture a dangerous criminal. However, Alice remains convinced that the visitor's intentions are to save the planet, while the patrol doesn't make any effort to improve the world. She believes that humanity can be rescued without resorting to time travel. All she needs to do is go back and steal her father's laptop. Nevertheless, Constance assures Alice that her plan will not succeed. As Constance exits the room, a surprising visitor arrives. It's Alice from the future. She imparts some important advice to present-day Alice, cautioning against stealing her father's laptop and interfering with his actions. Future Alice explains that she has lived a wonderful life, made possible by their father, and emphasizes that people often complain about the world without truly understanding. She also reveals that their father will soon fall ill due to heavy drinking, which began after their mother's death. Consequently, future Alice advises her present-day counterpart to spend as much time as possible with their father. The patrol returns Alice and Gilbert to their original time and place, right before their arrival at the hideout. In the morning, Gilbert, while preparing for work, notices the laptop on the table and remembers Alice. He checks her childhood room, where she pretends to be asleep. Meanwhile, the captive visitor and Raph are brought before Constance in her office. She declares that the two of them will finally face the consequences for their actions. The visitor contends that he actually saved many lives, but Constance cannot know this. According to him, when time travelers succeed, time resets, and the patrol doesn't retain any memories of the changes. Only those who actively alter time can remember the alternate reality. This revelation leaves the patrol employees perplexed, and an infuriated Constance instructs them not to trust the criminal. As punishment for their crimes, the visitor and Raph are sentenced to the Hole, a prison without time. Just as Gilbert is about to sign documents with Axomako, he experiences a sudden change of heart. Back home, Alice questions her father about his decision, and he responds that he simply wants to spend the day with her. Meanwhile, in the patrol office, a signal arrives alerting them to significant changes in time. The visitor explains that these changes are internal, involving Gilbert, and they cannot interfere. Constance, however, asserts that she can do whatever she pleases and orders her employees to locate Gilbert and ensure he signs the documents. If he refuses, she adds, they should eliminate his seemingly inconsequential daughter, who possesses no ambitions and wields no influence over him. Louise begins to doubt the legality of this order, but Constance suspends her and dispatches Mateo and Victor on the mission. In the future, the radioactive cloud approaches the hideout, and Least Weasel urges Henry to take action. Victor and Matteo break into Gilbert's home and, menacingly, Matteo coerces him into signing the documents. Suspecting something amiss, Constance dispatches her assistant Richard to track Louise. At the last moment, Louise unexpectedly decides to switch allegiances, deceiving Richard into falling into the hole. She releases the prisoners, hoping that, if successful, their actions will go unnoticed. Raph reveals that Louise won't remember this, but she has already assisted them. According to their plan, Raph is to rescue Alice from Victor, the visitor will confront Matteo and help Gilbert, and Louise will deal with Constance. However, Raph's attempt to save Alice from Victor takes a clumsy turn, and Victor quickly incapacitates him. Likewise, the visitor's teleportation onto Gilbert's car roof is anything but graceful. Louise informs Constance that their mission has been accomplished, but Constance skeptically inquires about Richard's whereabouts. Just then, they receive news that the prisoners have escaped. Constance craftily dims the lights in the room and attacks the bewildered Louise. Meanwhile, Raph regains consciousness and begins teleporting unpredictably, preventing Victor from taking a shot at him. Matteo ventures outside to check on the fallen visitor, but unexpectedly finds himself and the visitor transported to the time of World War I. In the future, the radioactive cloud inches closer to the hideout, causing increasing concern. Least Weasel urges Henry to hasten his efforts, but he fretfully explains that he simply doesn't have enough time to build a time machine. Meanwhile, in the midst of the World War I battlefield, Matteo and the visitor engage in a breathtaking fight, only to be bombarded by airstrikes suddenly. Back with Alice, she helps Raph overcome Victor and reaches out to her father. However, Constance intervenes, snatching Gilbert's phone and triumphantly announcing that the visitor has been neutralized. In the hideout, Henry delivers the grim news that constructing a time machine is beyond his capabilities, leaving the disheartened children resigned to their fate. Gilbert is on the brink of signing the documents when something extraordinary begins to occur. It turns out that Raph and Alice have been transported back to the moment of Alice's birth, and with a gun pointed at Henry, they insist on his intervention to save her mother. All around them, reality vibrates, vanishes, and transforms. Frustrated and furious, Constance reacts, and the visitor explains that Alice is erasing herself from the timeline. Meanwhile, during childbirth, Alice's mother awakens and sees her grown-up daughter. Confused, she asks who Alice is. Alice responds that she's nobody and slowly fades away. Realizing what's happening, Gilbert cries out that he doesn't want to forget his daughter. He desperately calls her name, but suddenly finds himself back in the kitchen, where one of his daughters asks who Alice is. His wife approaches and reveals that Alice was their sister, who didn't survive birth. Shocked, Gilbert remembers he was supposed to sign something. His wife tells him that he already signed everything and shows him a newspaper article about his eco-friendly renewable energy project. The visitor awakens with a severe headache. Least Weasel asks about his condition, and Dr. Henry explains that his brain is adjusting to the new reality. When inquired about the radioactive cloud, Least Weasel responds that it never existed. Henry adds that this time, a patrol member actually helped them, and she remembers everything. Now, they have their own agent, opening up limitless possibilities. During a celebration at the pub, Henry explains to a puzzled Raph that Alice created an extraordinary time paradox. They approach a table where Alice is waiting for them. She admits that even she doesn't fully understand what happened. Henry clarifies that she managed to undo her own birth, yet she hasn't disappeared, creating a unique existence where she's both present and absent. Have you ever tried to make sense of time travel paradoxes? Could you sacrifice your present life to save humanity in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Flick Spoilers signing off.